Good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Had a busy week. What about your week? How it's been?
Oh, it's been pretty standard. Oh well, kind of standard. I guess standard is I guess a little bit of a weird word at the moment post COVID, but yeah, it's been nice. Been seeing everyone coming back into the gym, so that's been nice.
You've been socializing a bit, back in the gym doing your thing?
But from a social distance, I've been socializing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, how does it work for you at Nomad? How does it goes? People can just walk in New South Wales, as far as I know.
Um, well, yes and no. When we started, when they first said that we could open, they said we could open with a maximum of 100 people, but making sure that we kept in line with the one person per 4 square meter rule. So we got all our booking system ready and we were all good to go, making sure we capped at 100. And then the night before we opened, they said that we actually only had to abide by the one person per 4 square meter rule. And because we have a very large facility, that meant that we could have up to about 220 people in the facility at one time, which having a comp doesn't happen. So we got to after the first weekend, which we didn't want to scrap the bookings at that point. So after the first weekend, we scrapped the bookings, and yeah, everyone can just rock up as they like. But I know a few of the other gyms, the smaller gyms, have had to keep their booking systems in place.
Okay, and people are excited. Is it busy? What's? I just haven't
Oh,
been to a gym lately. I don't know.
was going to be far slower the return to it, but yeah, everyone's super excited, super pumped to be back. Everyone's really complimentary and happy. Never had so many happy customers. I mean, like I have a lot of happy customers, but in customer service, you generally deal with a lot of less happy people a lot of the time as well. But everyone's been so understanding, and like the process of obviously dealing with a lot of the memberships over this time has been a little bit like just winging it. But everyone's been so understanding and accepting, and they're like, "Yes, thank you so much for doing that. Really appreciate it." And it's like, well, it's your membership, but yeah, I mean, no worries.
Um, so, what would you say? Like, people train at home? Is people are unfit in general, or as fit as before COVID? Like, I know lots of people
I
go
think
on the.
I think it's a bit of a mix. I mean, you've got the people that trained at home that are now injured, that are not coming. You've got people that didn't train at all, who are not injured but are getting like blood everywhere because they've got flappers all over their hands. And
Yeah.
then you've got trained at home and have like kept their training at home strategy in place as they've come back to the gym. So like even though we've got like a gym full of new boulders, like over 100 new boulders, they're like only on the hangboard or only on the campus board. You're like, guys, come on, you had 3 months to do that. Have fun.
So you guys put lots of effort in setting a brand new gym, basically.
Yeah. We put a lot of effort in. We were really happy with because we hadn't actually ever done a complete set with just Nomad setters before. It was usually to do with a comp or an event, and we would have brought additional setters from other gyms in to help with the load. But because we had such a long time to reset the gym, we just did it with all Nomad setters, and we're the happiest with the product we've ever been. So yeah, we were like, yeah, don't need any of those other guys.
Okay, so you reckon you got a team of root setter?
Yeah, I think we got a pretty good team of setters. We When we first opened, I don't necessarily like sharing setters with other gyms, not because I'm selfish, but just because it's the main product that as a climbing gym you produce. So I don't want that same product to be produced everywhere. Like what's going to a different gym if it's just the same thing somewhere else, right?
No, it's your
Uh,
flavor. I understand that.
yeah. So from the beginning, I didn't want to share setters, but also we didn't have a very experienced team. So we spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to upskill all our setters. And now I think we've gotten to a really good standard. It's taken us 2.5 years, but that's how upskilling works. It takes time. But yeah, pretty happy with it.
So, can you tell us who's your main player in your team? Drop names or something? Could say names
Yeah,
or.
yeah, I can drop some names. Um, so our head setter is Fabrizio Mattioli, who came over about 4 years ago from Argentina, and we pretty much grabbed him like as soon as he got here. And he has been setting not so much in a commercial capacity, but he's been setting in gyms around Argentina for the best part of 10 years. And then he came over here and we got him on the setting team. And it was originally myself, Aurel Jalot, and him who was doing the setting. And then as more responsibility came, I had to sort of take a step back because I couldn't keep doing as much setting as I was doing. And Aurel had to move away and we put Fab in charge, and he's been so diligent and he's done so much, like, because obviously route setting is quite a new art form and industry, that there isn't a whole lot of like upskilling resources available. It's just pretty much you and find something that works for you. You like, maybe you might pull from a few different other industries like design theory and some other, but he's done a really good job, and he's put together a lot of sort of upskilling resources for the other members of our route setting team, who at the moment Sam and Ellie Mountford. Yeah, so we have sort of like upskilling days where prepared some sort of presentation for us, and we go through that as a team. And yeah, and we also go over like the demographics of our sort of what our key, you know, green climber might be. Who is our quintessential green climber, and like what are we setting for that person? And we try and have a specific member of our community that we think about when we're trying to do that boulder. So we also, when we're in those days, when we have those days, we sort of go through sort of those, yeah, those, I don't know. Yeah, basically just those like key climbers that we're trying to target with our setting.
So basically, it takes a lot. Seems to take lots of time in your week. That route setting aspect. What would you say? 30% of your time, or?
Yeah, I would say about 30% of my time probably. But it's the biggest part of any climbing gym's product, so it needs to take majority of the time.
So, are you the head route setter, or your role is someone else?
No, I'm just a setter on the team. Fabricio is the head setter, which can sometimes be a little bit confusing with like the dynamics of power. But I try as much as possible to take a back seat when I'm in the setting, and just operate as a setter and not too much outside of my lane, but still sometimes
But at
the
the same time, you're his manager. So,
yeah, exactly. Sometimes I yeah have to pull him up, but I try very hard not to, because it's not a good. It just confuses things if I'm there.
the way
Yeah,
I see it, it's like an artistic expression, you know. So you gotta let the artist do his thing.
yeah, exactly.
And okay, just trying to improve my signal for some reason. There's not great internet right now, but it doesn't really matter because I'll for the playback. But at the moment, not too sure what's happening. But we'll just keep going. So we talk about route setting and quickly managing the gym. Is it your head route setter who's ordering the climbing hold, or it's you?
It used to be, but I've now delegated that to Fabrizio, so he takes care of all that.
Yeah.
Which I might throw in a couple of sets that I really want. So you can get what you want, but these are the ones that I want. So
So,
that's
for
yeah.
example, what's the flavor of the month right now that you like?
The flavor of the month or the flavor of my life is cheetah climbing. Their holds favorite. I think they do such a great job in terms of like commercial holds. There's like obviously a lot of like really impactful big fiberglass volumes that you see around like on Instagram and stuff, and they look great, but trying to fit like multiple lines into a wall with those is really hard. So I think Cheetah does a really good job. They also do really big fiberglass. Not to say they don't do big fiberglass, but they like all of their regular holds are really good, and majority of them have dual techs, and I am such an advocate of dual techs. I know a lot of climbers absolutely hate it, but from a setter's perspective and from like gym operator's perspective, it's the best because it just makes, like, depending on the proportion of the hold that's dual techs, it makes them look so clean for so long as opposed to every other hold that as soon as it gets chalk and rubber on, like
Oh,
sometimes
yeah, yeah.
it is.
I didn't think about that aspect for the dual tech, but yeah.
And I think they've done really well. Like a lot of companies have implemented dual techs into their series of holds, but I think Cheetah's done it really well in both an invasive way, like where it's like almost 90% covered dual text, and in like a non-invasive way where it's just might just be a few strips, because even those few strips, like they're not going to hold onto chalk and they're not going to hold onto rubber, so you're still going to have like a really crisp color on your wall even like four weeks into a set.
Um, yeah, dual tech's been around for a while. I remember root setting a comp line back in Montreal, like,
Yeah.
and basically what I done is I put all the no texture for foothold, and
You're
everyone
cool.
hated me. You know,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it. No one logs them, but that's because there's one guy who sent the line. It was doable. It's just
yeah,
people don't like new challenge they didn't train
yeah,
for, basically, or something.
yeah. Insecurity for sure is a massive part of comp climbing, is just pushing through fear, and definitely standing on dual text holds is fear.
Well, I think it's also relevant to, lots of bouldering outside is on poor feet.
Yeah,
So those guys throwing big move on big volume, that's really cool. But they come to a slab technical outside, they'll be like, there's no feet.
no, it's true.
So how much you think, like I think you're probably a different generation that where you start climbing on the plastic, and I'm coming from starting on
Yeah,
the rock.
I think I was sort of like earlier generations that started climbing on plastic, because I started climbing in 99, uh, and wasn't many gyms around, but I definitely got into it because my sister started working at a gym. And yeah, then quickly went outdoors. But yeah, definitely started on plastic, which I think before that was not necessarily the done thing.
Hmm. Um, what's happening that where I was trying to get with that is you think the climbing gym is an end by itself, which lots of customer basically live in a city and they might be happy as doing that all their life. But
Oh,
do you think climbing gym are still a stepping stone for outside or a stepping
yeah, I think it's split. I think it is still definitely a stepping stone for outside. I would say now probably 90% of the people that climb have started in a gym, or probably more specifically a bouldering gym, because that's really where the boom's been in Australia in the last few years. Um, but then there's definitely, as we see this shift into lifestyle sports, as sort of everyone's coining climbing and surfing and skating these lifestyle sports, we see people coming into it purely for the health and fitness aspect of it, and it's just like a gym membership for them. They come in, they do 2 or 3 sessions a week, and that's like their health and fitness, and then they sort of tick that little box for their week off, and they don't have to worry about it anymore. So there's a lot of members that are coming in purely for the fitness aspect of it. And I think that's almost a more sustainable method of like business model in terms of climbing gym, is to be catering to those people as well, because they're not the ones that are going to buy a van and move to the Blue Mountains.
Well, you only have to drive up the hill if you live in Sydney. Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that though, because I just feel different. I feel that
Explain your
climbing
feelings.
isn't end in itself. Like, there's way more cooler movement you can do. Like, you go outside, you might walk in a boulder field for days without finding a line. It's a big contrast compared to you walk in and you got 3 star after 3 star after 3 star of every grade in front of you.
Yeah, but there's definitely something that cannot. Well, there's not something like there's like nature can't be recreated indoors, no matter how you try to do it.
Yeah, well, lots of people do that to replicate crux on their project.
Yeah, I know, but it's still like the reason that's their project isn't necessarily just because of the piece of rock. It's about the whole aesthetic practice of being outdoors. It's about like the serenity and the animals, and like
Yeah.
all sorts of things. The view, like
Talking
not
about
having not
aesthetic,
having traffic to get there, not having to find like struggle to find a park. All these things that influence our.
aesthetic shit. Um,
But don't
aesthetic of the gym evolve a
keep,
lot. Like a gym used to be a old, dusty, woody, and now it's so beautiful. Like
yes,
like
as it should be. If people are paying,
yeah, yeah. That's it. That's what we wanted 20 years ago, but all we had was plywood and blocks of wood. Okay, so let's move on to your weeks. Like, okay, you've set a lot, but you talk about borrowing paperwork. You probably don't want to talk too much about that, but there's all management and organizing and the new challenge with COVID, I guess. Is that a big part of your week? Do you enjoy this part, or you rather
um,
just go set?
I mean, it varies from week to week, honestly, on how much I have to do. But I do really love it. I mean, climbing is it's my purpose. So yeah, everything I do around my day to day is usually around how I can bring more to the gym and do more with it. So this sort of week, I've been really focused on program development, and implementing like a whole new structure for not necessarily our kids. We already have kids programs and they're doing really well, but more for our members that are coming in. Because we see a lot of members coming in and after 2 years sort of like plateauing, and they shouldn't be plateauing after 2 years. But I don't think because for myself, I grew up in a team doing like a youth squad as well, so I was constantly being taught new things. But these adult climbers that are coming in are plateauing after 2 years, and they don't necessarily have the resources available to them, really at any gym, I don't think, to continue to break through that plateau.
Yeah,
So that was sort of what my structure was this week in trying to implement that and sort of break all of the fundamental aspects of like strength conditioning, movement, technique, all these other things, how we can like break them down into sort of facets of maybe like V0 to V1, V2 to 4, that sort of area. So we can run specific classes on those things. So it doesn't necessarily lock them into like a week by week training thing, but yeah, obviously I could talk about. You can see that I'm passionate about it, so I could keep talking about it, but I won't because I don't necessarily think people are going to be that interested in my program development. But
yeah.
yeah, my week.
It's the complexity of the service you offer. It's not just a wall with climbing all. It's all
Well, that's what I want it to be anyway. That's the ideal.
like it's basically become like church for a climber. It's just a sacred place where you meet your friends and do your activity you love.
Yeah.
It was pretty harsh for a few months not to be able to go.
Yes. I can imagine it would have been. I mean, I was here every day, but for those
So
people,
so you still climb a bit while you're there because you
yeah, I probably had the best home woody in Australia. But yeah, it
so
was definitely.
all gym employee had the best time the gym for themselves for months.
Yeah. Well, before we closed, I used to like if it had been a particularly long week, I'd be a little bit grumpy. God, I just want to, appreciate all the hard work I do without all these people asking me questions, and I used to get a bit bitter. But now after COVID, I'm like, oh, people, all the people, come in, come close to me. Like,
Yeah, you
I
got.
promise I won't take you for granted again.
No, that's great. Yeah, I haven't been to Nomad that often, but the vibe I got from the place was really friendly. I wish I had a place like that in Brisbane, kind of thing. When I walked in,
Oh, I think you guys have got tons up there. I think all the
uh, well,
you're
these
best.
days a bit more, but I don't think there is. Maybe with West End 2 is coming around the corner, but it's not up for a while. Like
Mm,
something who's that size that you can have session after session and work new problem if you want every day. That's
mm,
the critical mass I see.
yeah.
So yeah, Sydney gym is basically I compare it to a bit what I seen in Montreal. It's a different level from the rest of the country, I'd say. Just because you got more people, obviously, I guess, or
Yeah.
you're just more
Yes, we do
passionate
have
than us, or
a very large population. But yeah, everything. I mean, I've travelled a fair bit and climbed all over the world. I think Australia as a whole does a good job. I think we get sort of overlooked a little bit in terms of our gym and setting standards. I think everyone should be looking at us. I think we've done a great job.
Well, it does show in the comp circuit. there's always one or two setter from any gyms, and you can see everyone. The level in Australia is just amazing. I think.
Yeah, I mean the difficult thing for Australian setters is not necessarily that they're not as talented as the IFSC setters. Is that we just don't have we don't have IFSC setters to give us recommendations to go. Because I'd love to set for like some of those big events, but I just don't have anyone that's going to recommend me because I've never set with an IFSC setter. So it's kind of like a tricky circle to navigate. You're like, but if I have never set with an IFSC setter, how am I meant to get the recommendation to set with the IFSC setter? I don't understand. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that's like holding Australian setters back is that inability to have access to IFSC setters, which I guess means we have to pay money to bring them over because there's no other way we can really get access to them.
Yeah, well, basically that's mentorship. You need external input to fill the
Yeah,
place, but I think also a few setters are on the World Cup, like yourself. I'm just showing on the stream now an old picture of you. Second, I don't know which World Cup was that, but um, climbing World Cup problem gives you idea to set your own problem once you're back home.
yeah,
The picture I got is what 2018 June.
yes, that is no, that's Tokyo.
No, next stop Innsbruck.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and
So yeah, you've been on the comp circuit a bit. Let's get out of your normal weekday.
yeah. So I haven't gone. That was the last. Oh no, it was. No, it wasn't. Innsbruck was my last one. But yeah, that was. Yeah, that was the last purely Boulder World Cup I did, and I ended up in 21st for the second time in a row, which was pretty heartbreaking. Because that's one spot off semi-finals. But then things just got a little bit more hectic with work and life, and I had a couple of health things, so I sort of took a bit of a break. I don't know if I'll end up going back to comp climbing. I still climb a lot. I mean, not necessarily comp climbing, World Cup climbing. I still climb a lot, and I still think I'm in relatively good form. So I'd like to just keep that option open to me.
Okay, so when's your first camp? It was like, did you got right into the camp because you said you stayed
Oh, when like
outside?
eating,
Yeah,
uh,
let's go back a bit.
way back. I
No,
think
no, not that
I
way.
was maybe 8.
98.
No, I was 8, so it was like 2001.
Okay, yeah, right. Um, wow. And I guess you were in junior, not open A. You probably would have one open A already.
I think I was a youth D.
You D.
Yeah.
So what's your first experience was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I love that vibe, or I rather train by myself.
Um, I loved competing. I really loved climbing with my sister, who was my coach at the time. And yeah, so I think more than anything, I started climbing just to be around her because she's 10 years older than me, so she was kind of like a parental figure for me. But I guess I don't know why I love comp climbing so much, to be honest. I don't honestly know. I like
Or
it's
what do you are you excited the night before?
I'm
I
nervous.
used to be a bit of a stressor myself, like
I
with
mean, yeah, I'm
studying and
nervous, but I'll play it off cool, of course. But I honestly don't know because during the actual process of it, there's so much adrenaline and like so much psych, and I do really love when I do something in a comp that I never otherwise probably would have been able to do purely because of like the crowd and the adrenaline pumping and all this other stuff that I've just like, and I'm like, holy shit, I just did that. And but I mean, I don't like losing. I don't like going in comps and not doing well.
yeah, fair
Uh,
enough. No one does.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's a combination of a lot of things in comp climbing, but most of the time, I think it's just pushing yourself past a barrier that you otherwise wouldn't have pushed yourself past. And I think in a lot of cases, and probably most specifically in the last couple of years for me, I haven't felt like I've had enough energy to put into that because it is exhausting. Like there's some comps that I've come out of and like I've been exhausted for weeks, like not necessarily just like physically, but just like completely drained everything. Um, So it's super mentally challenging. Uh, and that's probably what I like the most is to put myself in uncomfortable positions like that. I guess I take that approach to most things in my life is like just throw yourself into it and deal with it when you're there. So and that's probably how I ended up on the World Cup circuit as well. Just throw yourself in there.
Well, it's quite a journey. You know, this takes a bit more commitment when you start taking plane to go to camps. So, how many World Cups you've done in total?
Um, I
How
don't remember.
many?
Like I don't know, maybe like
Say again. Sorry, I lost you.
10.
10. Yeah.
Yeah, probably about that.
And what would be the
Yeah.
event to remember
What
for
was my 10?
event to remember, like because you loved it or you qualify well, or I don't know.
Um, what was my favorite? Probably like the moments that stand out for me was my first, no, maybe it was my second year in Vail, Colorado, and I flashed my first boulder, and I just remember that because that was like the first boulder I'd flashed in the World Cup, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh,
Um,
oh yeah, here.
and then,
So that was not a V0.
pardon?
That was not a V0.
I don't think so.
Okay.
It could have been. Maybe the route setters were throwing us. And then my other two like really memorable times was India when I qualified 21st, and then Tokyo when I qualified. Probably actually Tokyo was above was probably the top one when I qualified because I didn't think I was going to come out at 21st because you don't know until you've finished your round. You don't know how the hell you've gone. Like you might be able to see some people that you're competing next to and seeing how they're going, but you've got no idea. So then you're like come out of it and you're like, oh, I did bloody terrible. And then someone would be like, no, you like basically meant, yeah. So that was probably my best one because it was such a hotly contested competition. Like there was a lot of really strong names in it. So to end up 21st, like an Oceana actually ended up 20th in that comp. So she just snuck into semis and I just missed out, which was a bummer. But it was awesome for Osh because I think that was her first semi-final in an open event. And that same comp, the same thing happened to Tom Farrell. He finished his qualification round, and we were like, "Oh my god, you were like so close!" And we were cheering him on like so hard in the last one. He was like, "Oh shit, I did such a bad job. I'm quitting comp climbing." And then we're like, "Dude, you qualified 21st. Like that was so good. Of like a field of 100 people, you can't be disappointed about that." But during the time,
World. That's it.
during the round, you just don't know that that's how it's going. You don't know that everyone else is doing as terribly as you are.
So talking about the other Australian on the circuit, was it cool like traveling with other competitor or some competitor you were the only Australian? Like how close that inner circle of World Cup Australian competitor are?
Um, I think like to start with, when I first started doing World Cups, I was very much like out of my depth because I was a substantial amount younger than the other guys I was doing it with. So I was like traveling around with people like James Cassay and Tom, who were both like 7 and 10 years older than me. So I was definitely a little bit out of my depth, and I think they were just like a little bit, didn't necessarily want to hang out with like the 18-year-olds, but um,
You were the
but
young one. Okay.
yeah, I was really young, but maybe not as young as some of the ones that are doing the World Cups now. But as like a couple of years later, I had people like Lucy and Roxy coming up and wanting to do them as well. So that was good. Even though they sort of did lead comps and I was more in the bouldering scene, it was still kind of good because they had an idea of what was going on as well. I wasn't necessarily like, otherwise I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. Um,
Well, that's it.
and
That's I know Lucy a little bit, and that's one thing she is challenging. Like you're way on the road. Like I don't know if you do a few World Cup in a row, you're far from your family and close friend for a while. So if you don't have, I guess, other competitor with you to connect with, it can be a lonely road.
oh, absolutely, definitely, and especially when like there's usually a few Americans and Canadians and the British that we generally get along with because we all speak English. But it's not people that you've grown up climbing with. You can't necessarily, I don't know, like reflect on your performance with them because like if Lucy or Roxy's there, I can be like, oh, I felt like I could have done that, and they're like, yeah, you could have done that. Like you've definitely got like, but if you're talking to people you don't know, it's not the same. Um,
Yeah.
And then people like Oceana came on the scene and just obliterated us. And but she's such an incredible climber, and I really enjoy competing with her because she's just so positive and like she's not super competitive like not like everyone else. We're not super competitive, but yeah, she's very friendly in terms of like I guess yeah competing on a World Cup with someone. I think that's generally a lot of climbers is that climbers are not super competitive, which is why you get to see World Cup climbers or even national level climbers how they always, like you see them working out boulders. It's not a highly competitive sport, or even if it's not highly competitive, it's not that people want to win because they want to win. They want to win because they're the best. They don't want to win by the fact that someone missed a footer.
Yeah, no, that's always upsetting when you
Yeah,
fall in a pump. Everyone wanna go to the pump flash pump level,
yeah,
but there's so many variables, you know. I
so
think
many.
I think if you do get to the flash pump most of the time, that's probably because you train your technique really well and you don't fail in
Yeah,
foot slip and stupid misreading
yeah.
or whatever. Um, okay, let's move on to something else. Jesus, 4:20 already.
Time
Um,
flies. I told you, Antoine. You just got to get me talking, and I'll keep going.
no, no, I'm happy. To be honest, not many people watching right now, so it's really us two. But because it's the first time we do it, obviously, and it's probably people still at work a bit too. So what will be good, I think, is people will be able to watch it back
Yeah,
whenever it suits them. What I'd like to go through is I've worked with you in the past, like I think you were commenting, which was
yeah,
2019 national. We were
yeah. I do
together.
like getting on the commentary and
Yeah,
talking some smack.
yeah, you were amazing. You're my top female commentator. Male would be Campbell probably. Yeah,
I can work. That's fine.
that's like. How did you enjoy being behind the scene a bit more? You know, like I know you already are as a route setter, but as a media, it's like the other behind the scene crew.
Yeah, I mean, like running events and all that aspect around events is something I've always been really interested. Like I ran my first state bouldering titles when I was like 18 because usually my sister would run them back in Canberra, but she was in hospital that year, so I had to run it, and I was 18, so I was pretty young. But yeah, I've been running comps ever since. Like I love the organization that goes into it. I love making it bigger and better, and I think that's kind of, and I like to think I put on a pretty good event. So being just like an aspect of the media was, I guess I've like emceed events before, but not necessarily been like on commentary of live streams. So it was a little bit different, but it was really fun, and it was fun to be able to engage with people sending in questions, and also not having like immediate backlash for saying like some sassy comments.
No, it's all right. There's not much censorship around here. You can do whatever you want.
That's what I thought. I thought anyone that's going to censor me is either too busy to come for me now, or they're on the wall. So it doesn't matter.
No, you know what it is. An event is just chaos in the making. Is
Yeah,
managing that chaos and make it look smooth.
yeah,
Um, okay, and I'd like to go further back, like probably the first time, and I think I met you before that, but probably the first live stream that I was really part of with the CA was in Ballarat in 2015.
yeah. That was a heartbreak comp for sure.
Okay, why you say that?
Oh, I qualified first. I think from players, I qualified first into finals, and then I blew it on finals. So I
Blew it. Like
blew it.
last problem or
No, I blew the last problem, which was I think that was the difference between me getting first and fourth. So
yeah. Oh, okay, so you missed the podium.
yeah,
Well, at least you made the final. But
yeah,
I guess your expectation for that camp were pretty high. You were you're
Um,
fit by the
I
remembering.
got high for that comp. I was actually still debating, I think, a couple of weeks out whether I was going to go in it or not because I'd had a really big year of uni. So I was just not feeling 100%. But yeah, then I went in it, did pretty well. And then yeah, Nationals has still eluded me though, Anton. I still have not won a national title in bouldering.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so you gotta
I,
do more. Yes, that's I
yeah,
guess.
kind of, I don't know. Every year that goes by and I stuff it up, I'm like, God damn it.
But you've been state champion in
Oh,
many
I've been,
states. You were state
yeah,
champion in Queensland. You've been state
like,
champion.
there's been years that I've won every other single comp and then I've just stuffed up nationals. Like, it's
Crumbled under
not,
pressure, or it's just a fluke?
I honestly don't know what it is. Yeah, something about that title seems to elude me. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to try a lot harder now that Oshi's up there, though. A lot harder.
Yeah,
If I
she
that title.
seems got some potential, that one.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so we'll go back later to that, but I'd like to go back to Ballarat, and I got an
Yeah,
interview we did together, and it was a few interesting questions. But just before we go to that, who do you think's are going to qualify for the Olympic in December?
who do I think is going to qualify?
Apart from you, yeah.
No, it won't be me. It will be, I think it's going to be Tom Farrell and Oceana McKenzie. That's where my
Ooh,
money.
yeah. Oceana is a safe bet, I'd say, but I'll still go for Lucy.
Yeah.
Uh, you don't reckon Tamal Aaron will pick up the pace, or
I
who did well at the last national too?
Yes, but the last couple of months before COVID, Tom F was getting. He's sneaky, that one,
He's
because I get to
beast.
see he's sneaky. I get to climb. I get to see him and climb with him all the time, so I know what level he's at.
Oh,
But he
sneaky training. Yeah, yeah.
doesn't necessarily like publicly talk about it, and specifically like his speed runs over the last few months have been very fast.
Yeah, I
So
think that's where he stand out from the other
yeah,
strong guys.
he's stronger in bouldering than Tomo at the moment. I think Tomo's got him in lead, but I think the splitter is going to be speed, and I think Tom Farrell's got that explosive power.
Hmm. All right. Let's see if who win the bet. But I'm gonna go Tomo H and Lucy, just
All right, that's fine.
just because I can. Um. All right. We're getting close towards the end, I think, because after an hour, people attention span these days. But just a quick one. I'll try to ask similar question to every guest I do in the future, but I'd like to talk about what's the access issue in your surrounding, and how passionate are you with this, since you always have access to your climbing gym, apart, yeah,
Yeah,
almost.
absolutely. So I think for New South Wales climbers specifically, in the last week and a half, or even less, we've seen like the big uproar about route names. It started in New South Wales, but it's kind of erupted nationwide and even globally. Actually, there's been a large push globally to get all of those discriminative names changed. So I guess that's the biggest, and it's an access. It is an access issue, which I think people can like might not know. Like, yes, it's not fair for members of our community that those names discriminate against, but everything that's happening in the Grampians now, like the last thing the climbing community needs is to have this reflection on it that makes us look, transphobic, homophobic, racist, like gender, and
Hmm.
we need to remember that when we're talking publicly on forums that if we're coming across like this, then this narrative that climbers are like racist overall is going to continue to be perpetuated, and that's just going to play to any sort of council that wants to shut down climbing but doesn't necessarily have grounds to. That's just going to play to that.
Well, yeah, it doesn't really give the good first impression.
Yeah, and I know, being a member of this community, that that's not the case, but that's not necessarily what it's going to come across as in public forums, because public forums, which is where every piece of like which is where every journalist and every sort of news outlet is going to be the first place they look for resources, is going to be on social media platforms. And people that tend to be on social media platforms tend to be the contentious members of the community that are going to reflect poorly. So we do need to be really careful of that. So that's what I'm really passionate about at the moment. So many other issues. Like during COVID, there was issues with, like specifically, I think in Sydney, it's a bit different because we've got such a high population of climbers in general that want to climb, and we've got such easily accessible bouldering crags. So we've got so in the city, so it's so easy for people just to buy a crash pad and go out, and then not necessarily know the etiquette of climbing outdoors. Like they're leaving rubbish, they're parking in front of people's driveways, and like it's just about educating people about the like correct way to use a crag and not risk access for everyone else. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Just coming back to your name, and I think my next guest next month will probably talk about this too. As like the ethic and climbing is basically, yeah, I've both climbed that I gave project name, but in the end, the guy who free climb first give the name.
Yeah.
And basically, most of those names been controversial. I think they're like 90s kind of era.
80s, 90s.
Yeah. And I was just like reading a Facebook comment. Who was it? Nathan Noet. He was commenting, and I thought it was pretty refreshing. What he was saying is, he was like, if you feel like changing the name of my climb, just go hard. I don't really give about the name itself. I think it's really refreshing because basically that's where it's like, who's got the right to change that name without offending that ethic?
Yeah.
If you can communicate with the first ascender and make it right by the book, sweet. But if you can't, or if he doesn't want to, and that name is like the worst of all, do you say like, okay, stuff him, we're just gonna change it?
So I think the main issue is the crag. Well, it's not the issue, but that's sort of like where it's sort of stemming from, is the website The Crag, which is where everyone posts about their new routes. So I think in terms of they put out they didn't put out sort of, they already had a policy in place about discriminative names, but they'd never had to actually use it. So, or they never felt like they had to use it. And now I've talked to them a little bit, and now they are actually practicing what they were saying, which is that they would, if they got made aware of a climb that had, not good things in it, then they would contact the first ascensionist, and the name would be changed until the first ascensionist came back and said whether they wanted to change the name to something that was non-discriminatory, or whether they were going to keep it like that. And if they were going to keep it like that, then it wasn't going to be allowed on the crag. And if they changed it, then it would stay on the crag. So that's good. But I think
online, so those written guidebook who's printed.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're always going to be in circulation. So this argument that kind of like it's going to like the crag will lose its history is kind of a little bit of like a naught point, because those guidebooks are already out. That's already going to be there. Like, if they want to get that history, they need to find a 1980s Nowra sport climbing guide. Like, it's not necessarily going to be. And in terms of the first ascensionist, like the name of the route, I can't speak necessarily to like the connection that a first ascensionist has with their name on whatever piece of rock that they've climbed. But coming from from my perspective, I would think that the actual process of doing the first ascent and the piece of rock itself sort of outweighs the name that you inevitably give it, because it's just another label for something. So I think majority of the first ascensionists have changed them. I think there's been a few members of the community that have been playing a bit of havoc on the crag and changing names and changing descriptions and putting up new names that just sort of like continue to perpetuate this issue, which is just
there'll be a few troll on the internet.
Yeah, there is, and it's really not cool, because it's gonna look really bad on climbers, as I said, when like, I think it's inevitable when the media sort of like gets hold of it and starts painting climbers as racist and discriminatory, because like that kind of language is not acceptable in any other facet of our society. So I don't know why it's acceptable, or why they think it's acceptable regardless of history, because
But
again,
don't you think, Emma, like I just chat again with some of those guys, and it's actually the reason the name is like that. It's because it's not acceptable, and it's to open a debate there. So looking at the background, why this is the name, I think
a
it's
lot of the time
interesting.
that hasn't actually been many of the cases as to why that's been the name. A lot of the times the name has been supposedly in reference to, like, you know, a book that they were reading at the time, or rap music or something like that. But I think regardless of what it is, if you're referring to a culture or a like aspect of some of that's not part of your existence, I don't necessarily think you can be naming things based on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Have you done any first ascent yourself?
I haven't, which is why I like, which is why I said I don't necessarily feel like I can speak to how they name it. But
You don't name the problem. You do set inside, like give them names and grade.
no, we don't at Nomad. I know other places do, but we don't.
So yeah, okay. No, okay. That's just a little side note, but yeah, I think it's something we'll won't
I think
resolve in the next month. Yeah.
it's just about being like empathetic, if nothing else. Like
Exactly.
if I take someone to the crag, like, you know, a trans friend or something that comes to the crag and sees his names, and that person is uncomfortable and feels like discriminated against, like that's not something I want for someone that I care about. And I don't think,
Yeah, that's it. When you think about those names, there was no Facebook
yeah,
when they created it. You know, they thought
and it
the
would have
only way
been,
you could know is buying the book. You know,
yeah,
and now
and
it's
maybe people that went to that crag the entire year, and now there's probably like thousands of people that go to those crags every year.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
they didn't know how much climbing was going to explode.
Yeah. No, no. Yeah, I'm still a gray with this, but I'll go with the flow. Yeah. Let's say there's a few names that my first ascent I would add both that I wouldn't mind changing if it offends someone, but I think it'll take a bit more than just someone being offended. I'll have to
Oh yeah, absolutely.
probably listen to this and take it all in and
Yeah,
probably
well, that's what Craig's put out. The Craig's basically said that like you need to explain why it's this way, and if they don't agree with it, then they're going to change the name. Um, so yeah,
yeah,
and
because
absolutely,
it's just if you
like
put it black
you
and white, it's censorship and erasing history. That's where
can't,
I'm not sure it's relevant, but it's still something that okay.
I mean, it came up a lot in the forums when we were discussing it. When I had many a sleepless night on social media, um,
Forums
it's
on
like I had someone ask me like, is attack mode discriminatory? I was like, no, it's not. Like, it doesn't reference like Africa. It doesn't reference like Black African American lives. It doesn't reference like trans. It doesn't reference like homosexuality. It doesn't reference like any sort of those minority groups. So no, it's not offensive. If someone says I'm offended by that, it's like,
yeah,
well,
but
how?
lots of name I put out. There's always a double meaning, you know. There's the obvious you read, but there's like an inside story behind or something that okay, the crew knows that meaning, but
Yeah,
no one
absolutely.
does, you know. Okay, that's acceptable, but when it's just say out loud, black and white, used
Yeah,
to
and
be okay. Now today, it's something we have to discuss.
exactly, and that's the thing. Like maybe in 30 years' time, some of these names again will be not acceptable, because 30 years ago, unfortunately, some of those names were less frowned upon, because like they were frowned upon, but it was a different era, unfortunately. Which is not necessarily to say it was better, or yeah, definitely wasn't better. But they like in 30 years, something else might have happened, and some of these names might be offensive, and we'll just need to revisit it then.
Hmm. No, that's great. I'm just gonna go towards the last chapter of that screen. Thanks for your opinion there. You know, it's even just saying your opinion. Sometimes
It's
it's
hard,
committing. You know, because you put it out there, people will judge you.
absolutely,
So
and I
lots of
think
people just decide to stay silent and not
because
express their opinion.
it's definitely scary to speak, because especially when you're for me, someone quite privileged in this conversation, I'm very nervous that I'm going to say the wrong thing a lot of the time. So I think it's very important to remember people's intention, but also to be very cautious with how you speak, but not to limit, like not to be so cautious that you don't speak, because we do need people in our community that do have a voice and like come from a more privileged perspective to be speaking for those that don't come from the privileged perspective.
Okay, so let's move to the last thing. So I'd like to go back to Ballarat. I got that interview 6 minutes 30. We'll just zip through. But there's one or two questions in particular I thought would be cool to hear your answer today. Yeah, 2015, you were, yeah, at that point during the interview was after the qual. So you were like, you think you were winning that comp basically.
Yeah. I basically thought I'd won. I was about ready to go home.
And you know, Campbell couldn't compete that thing. He was the DJ, so he led that interview. So I'm not sure the sound will come out for those guys. Let's just try. Oh yeah, okay, there's sound. Oops, what's going on here? Hang on. Okay, so you're pretty happy at that point? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just keep moving. Okay, let's get your answer now, your 2020 answer. So what's your favorite style of boulder, he was asking?
What's my favorite style of boulder? I think my favorite style of boulder now is old school cranking.
45, jib foot, small crimps.
Yep, high feet.
Frog only, no drop knee, no cheating. Oh yeah, thumbs on top. Yeah,
thumbs
I feel
on.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what you said there. So you better with sloper these days?
I think I am better at slopers. I think I've just cultivated a lot more strength, so I can just squeeze harder on them.
Yeah, there was a few. There was a few big dyno in that camp in the qual. I remember big sideways dynos and a couple of big powerful moves that kind of suit you, I'd say.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember every boulder, but yeah, I think there was a sideways dyno, which was still pretty novel at that point in time in climbing comps.
Yes. Well, of all the camp I've ever been, I think this is the most full retard camp I've seen, because they just put it all out. They built a boulder. They start in a parking lot. It's just crazy the amount of hours it's been into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was a really cool camp. Let's see next question. We kind of covered that already a bit earlier, so I might just skip that one. Or you want to say something?
What was the question?
He's talking about the World Cup, just in general. Let's move on. That's not the question I want to talk to you about. Hang on, where are we at? Okay. All right. So what about 2020? You're focusing on competition still, but probably not the only focus.
Yeah, I mean, I'd still like to do comps. it's a little bit trickier with work to be able to manage when I'm going to have time and when I'm not going to have time to train for them. So it's a little bit um, unsure a lot of the time. A lot of the time, I'll just be maybe 4 weeks out from an event, I'll be like, oh my god, I'm actually ready for this event. Let's do it. But yeah, I do still love competing. I get a lot more nervous now, though. I think when I was younger, specifically in that comp, I was still kind of like a little bit like I don't think people expected as much from me. I actually remember a comment that Lee Cossey made at that comp to my brother, and Lee was like, "Oh wow, Emma's climbing like really well," and I was like, "Oh my god, Lee Cossey said that about me." um, and so I was a little unknown, but now like I've spoken to a few like other comp climbers about it. It's very like daunting going into a comp when people have expectations of how you should go. And definitely like in the Australian scene, I think there's a few people that like not to sound it's just like you don't want to go into a comp with the expectation to not stuff up, if that makes sense. Like you want to go and have to climb your absolute best and like but when it's like that you can't stuff up, it's a little bit more like oh you're like oh god, it's very stressful.
Yeah, that's the end game, man. That's the whole
Yeah,
crux of the thing, basically.
yeah, it was definitely a lot easier to just like throw my hat in the ring when I was like not as sort of established as a comp climber as I am now. But now I'm definitely a little bit more nervous,
So
and like
let's say,
I don't necessarily
say sorry.
I don't necessarily just want to jump into comps now. I feel like I actually have to be ready to go in a comp. I can't just be like, yeah, this will be fun. Let's go in a comp this weekend.
Yeah,
I'm
but
like,
off the couch camps, they're the best.
sometimes they're the best.
Because
Other
with the
times,
expectation, you're only going for fun and catching up with your mates.
yes, that would be a nice way to think about it.
Well, that's our role anyway. Everyone's different.
Let's go back to another question. Oh, what? Oh, okay, you said that. Okay, sorry, I'll tell you the question because it's 30-second lag for you. But Campbell's basically asking if you train differently for a World Cup or if you train for a national.
Not anymore. I think back then, I think I would have trained differently. And I think just because of the setting style, I had to. I found in Australia, in the setting style back then, I found that they set to height a lot more, which definitely like made it a bit harder for. Well, maybe not a bit harder, but I always found that I was in very small boxes. Um, all. Um, but in World Cups, I didn't ever find that I was like really restricted because I was pushed into a small box. So I was able to train for like really big, explosive, dynamic, coordinated things for World Cups, but I wasn't getting them in Australian comps. So, but now that's very different, and setters are way more experienced and they kind of like anticipate the height thing and they can set around the height thing. And it's very rare that I go into a comp now when someone's asked me like how tall I am. It's like, that has nothing to do with it. Like any setter that knows how to set can like work around the fact that there's going to be some outliers. It's not like I'm like 7 foot, like
So how tall are you?
I'm 180 centimeters tall.
Appendix?
186.
Yeah, so positive.
Yeah, of course.
Dreaming. No,
You've got to. I know Anna Davies
no
is
wrong
next.
answer there. Okay, let's keep going with
The interview almost finished. Jesus. Okay, there you go.
I think I make reference in that interview about wanting to put on bigger and better events than the comp that we were at.
Yeah, I think the bar is pretty high with Ballarat. You'll have to built a new gym and set it outside. And um, yeah, I think it's pretty nice. Like, we can just maybe do a sidetrack there and talk about SCA and what they've done for the sport in the last few years. You know, it starts from those events are not easy to organize and
I know.
finance. You know, there's like many layers to it, many volunteers, many front, and plan A never happened.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
how lucky are we to have the SCA crew pushing it and making it happen to the World Cup standard? Basically, that's what they do.
Yeah, well, that's what they're trying to do anyway, is get us to a level where we would be able to host a World Cup, which would do pretty big things, I think, for the sport in Australia. But yeah, over the last few years, I mean, we're in such a difficult phase of the sport at the moment because we've got the momentum from the Olympics and we've got pressure from like the rest of the world. But within Australia, we still like, even though it's a massive sport in terms of participation, like when you consider all the climbers that go to all the climbing gyms in Australia, so participation numbers are really high. We still kind of have the sporting associations, like New South Wales Sporting Association, still doesn't even recognise like our state body. And New South Wales is the biggest state for climbing, I think, in the country. So to not even get that recognised, like it's still like we've still got a way to go, but we've got all of this like external momentum that's coming in, but governance is not like moving as quickly as it kind of as we would necessarily like it to, which I guess is always going to be the case when you're dealing with governance. Um, but yeah, I think SCA is doing great with everything that they can do. But yeah, I think there is a lot of things that are limiting to that, and like along with governance being really slow in terms of acting on advice from AIS and international bodies and whatnot. We don't like until we have that recognition, we're not going to be able to get the money that we need from external sponsors, government grants, and all this other stuff to be able to put on the kind of events that we need to be able to run World Cups. So,
It's the egg
yeah,
of the chicken there, I think.
pardon?
Well, it's a bit the egg or the chicken. Like, that's what I was talking with Romain a few times during events. I'm like, we try to push the sport, make it as good as it can so we can generate interest. So then we can have sponsor who want to put in there and make it better. But there's no money right now. So you just got to make it better out of nothing to be able
Yeah,
to create that, that snowball who's big enough that goes down the hill by itself.
absolutely, absolutely, and it's very hard to do that, and I think it's sometimes harder for the governing body to do that. I've had a bit of luck in terms of getting money for sponsorship for events, just like privately through Nomad, and I think if there was a bit more of that, I think like a lot of gyms do really like Urban Climb does the biggest comp in Australia every year, and it's really good, and I think they get a fair bit of money from sponsorship for it. I'm not 100% sure. They keep those numbers close to their chest.
They don't lose money intentionally. They just go big or go home.
Yeah, which is a great mentality. I love that mentality. And I think Portside does a really good job. So those gyms that put on those really big annual events is fantastic for the sport and fantastic for SCA because it's cultivating all of this private money coming into the sport. Then as we continue to get more and more attendance at those events, we're going to get bigger private companies and not necessarily have to be reliant on those government funds.
Yeah, we just need like you know one big player, like, and then the other guys will want to be
I think
part of this
yeah,
too.
like Red Bull are sniffing around. Like there's a bit of money now.
Yes, I think so.
I think it
I'm
just
pretty
needs.
optimistic, but I just think like I
It's
spoke
not
to
even. It's not even optimistic. It's just about being patient. Like it's gonna happen for sure.
exactly. That's
Yeah, just when.
yeah, but in the meantime, you don't want to burn out your volunteer, because
Absolutely not.
every event, I know I may pull out 18-hour days usually for a few
Yeah,
days in a row,
yeah,
and that's got to be done because there's just so many volunteer under you. There's some stuff there's only you can do.
Yeah, and I guess like for people like yourself who put so many hours into it, I guess like there is an end game. Because like the success of your business is also sort of contingent on the success of the sport. I mean, I know you have contracts with external, like non-climbing based companies, which help to fund you, but there's volunteers that are literally just there because they love the sport, and like
Yeah,
there's no end.
it's all fueled by passion. That's the main fuel.
Yeah, yeah, they're putting in like 8 hours on their Saturday just because they love climbing, and that's amazing to me.
No, I think we are a pretty cool sport. All
Yeah.
right, let's go back to
Campbell with his annoying question. No, he's got. I just love Campbell knowledge of everyone and straight to the point. When he asks question, he knows exactly where he's going.
Yeah.
So let's see what he had to say there. Okay, that was that thing. Yeah, sorry, you cannot follow up what I'm listening to.
That's okay. You'll instruct me.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you just answered that question about the type of training.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question now, I just stop, is do you go on the rock much? Is anything out there you're proud of that you would have climb on the medium
Uh,
called rock?
do I go out on rock much? I definitely go out on rock a lot more than I did back then. Um, Last few months have been a little slow because while everyone's been going outdoors, I haven't necessarily wanted to be going outdoors because don't necessarily think it was or anyway was the correct thing to be doing during COVID. Because I know a lot of crags were well overpopulated, and I definitely, for myself, being the face of a business, didn't want to be encouraging that. So I tried to
Yeah,
stay.
you're trying to lead by example, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Which was a little bit detrimental to my outdoor climbing, but that's all right. Yeah, I definitely still go outdoors more. I do a lot more outdoor bouldering, and I do because I'm in Sydney now, and there just is a lot more outdoor bouldering. So yeah, I probably get out like at least once a fortnight now.
All right, let's go with the favorite boulder line in Sydney.
Ooh, my favorite boulder line in.
5 star. Who cares about the grade?
Um, I
Or
have
crag, if you cannot say a line.
no. I know. Uh, It's a what is it called? Oh no, I tried it just the other day and I was like, this is so me. Like
What is
it's
that? CC crag or something?
it's a front yard,
Okay.
slightly like less known crag. It's a V8. It's actually right next to the boulder that I'm really bad with names, which is why I can't remember it. Next to the V13 that Elijah just put up. Did you see that? Elijah
Yeah, I saw something in the news. Some pretty hard stuff by a
on that beautiful
young guy.
25-degree wall, which is kind of hard to find in Sydney. It tends to be very steep, and with my size, really steep is not necessarily my friend. But it's this gorgeous V8, which is with this really scary top out that Matthias fell off doing the other day when we were there. And it's like 4.5 meters up this top out, and I'm like, yeah, no, I really do that. Like that is a climb that I want to do. I'm gonna Google it real quick.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find out
I can
what this
check that too.
Oh, something. It's like Steve something. Stevie Wonder. That's what it is. Stevie Wonder.
Wonder.
Stevie Wonder. Yes, that's at the moment. That's my favorite.
Five
It really,
star.
yeah. But I think it's a pretty nails V8.
So are we talking compression or small crimp or weird
Uh,
movement?
Small crimps, kind of big-ish moves on like 30 degrees.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's like quite tall. It's like I reckon 4 to 5 meters tall.
It's pretty proud too, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Be a nice looking line.
So the question I wanted Campbell to ask you is like,
I cannot find it, but I think he's asking you about you want to get into organizing event yourself, which in 2015 I don't think you were doing yet.
I was doing like much more small scale, but I was still living in Canberra at that point, so I didn't have access to Nomad like I do now. So now I do a lot of those events.
That's
So I
it. How
think
big how big a part of your life this became?
how big?
Yeah,
Quite
like is that,
quite
yeah,
massive.
you're a
And
climber, but being someone organizing event is different.
yeah, absolutely. And I love doing it. Again, I don't know why I love doing it because it tends to make me do 100-hour weeks leading up to them. But yeah, I just love. I think I'm just really competitive in a lot of the things I do. So when it comes to running events, I'm like, yeah, I want to run the best event. And I think because I've been exposed to a lot of external sporting things, because I went through the university like just across the road from the AIS in Canberra, so I had a lot of exposure to a lot of sporting events, and I saw how other sports did it, and I wanted to bring more of that into climbing and make it more of like a demonstration almost, like really good for the audience. So that's kind of what I always want to do here. And I mean, long term, I'd love to get to a point with our events where we can like sell tickets to do it, which would be like a whole other level of like, I don't know. I know some gyms have tried to do that in the past and it hasn't worked well, but that's why I haven't done it yet because I'm not ready. I can't do that yet. But
No, no,
yeah, I think
I feel you. I think it does go there eventually.
yeah, I think so too. I think it was maybe like 2 years after that, or yeah, no, it would have been 2 years after that. I ran national bouldering championships here at Nomad. So, and I think that went pretty well. I mean, you were here.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Yeah.
smooth as. No, no, I didn't make that one. Sorry,
Oh,
I was in the mines.
oh no,
Yeah, looking at all the Facebook posts about it and saying, yeah, I'm not where I
yeah.
wish I was.
That, that was a pretty good event. That was actually quite a difficult event because a few months previously, I had not signed up to do nationals, but the director that was here when we first opened, who sold out a few months after, he wanted to host it. So he was like, "We're going to do state titles and we're going to do nationals this year." And I knew how much work events were, and I was like, "I don't know if we want to do both of them. Maybe just one." Like, no, 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 we can do two. We can do two. And so I was like, all right, we'll do two. And then that year we had to do New South Wales state titles. 6 weeks later, we did nationals. And then 6 weeks after that, we did the Red Bull topped out event with Chris Sharma. And I honestly think
Yep.
I didn't recover for like a year after. I was so trashed after
Well,
running
at least
all.
you finished hanging out with Chris, so it's not a bad day.
Oh, I was too tired and too busy to even talk to him. I was like, just fill in a waiver when he comes in. Just make sure you.
Yeah, I think he was in Brisbane before, and then he was going to Sydney after. Yeah, 2015. I still have the bracelet. It was
Yeah,
pretty cool.
yeah.
I think we're gonna.
Gonna We kind of went around way longer than I thought. Um,
Yeah, you got to cut me off at some point, Anton, because
so yeah, that's it. So I'm on the last screen now. So I just put the thumbnail, the poster of the event, and you talking. So if you want to close this and just say a few words, and what I'd like to do is maybe you could announce who's going to be our guest next month. I think I told you it was going to be.
oh, Campbell.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll let you close the stream and I'll press N when you say
Are
it's
you
finished.
like into the phone?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do is thanks everyone. This is Antoine from Radest. I'll let Emma finish this stream. Hope you enjoyed it. This is the first of many, hopefully. Thank you. So go ahead, Emma.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. I'm Emma Horan. And I've really enjoyed rambling with Antoine about my climbing and business and life's passions. Hopefully you enjoy the next one, which is going to be with Campbell Harrison next month, who is an amazing climber, also a member of the Australian team, super passionate and driven and smart. I'm sure he's going to bring a whole nother perspective to everything that I've already talked about today, and I'm really excited to watch it.
Uh, Okay. Well, thanks you. That's a wrap. And I hope we catch up soon, Emma. I'll go down to the
Yeah.
Blues as soon as I can. So I'll say hi. I'll
All
swing
right.
by
Sweet.
at Nomad for sure.
Excellent.
Okay. Have a good weekend.
You too.
See you. Bye, Emma.